welcome back to Healthy Selfish. I'm your host, Monique Selman, and the owner of Becoming Enriched. And so here at Healthy Selfish, we have been talking all about boundaries, everything you need to know. So what are they? What's the impact of not having them? How do the different genders actually deal with boundaries? And all of the things that we need to do to be able to function well within our boundaries. And so this is one thing you need to take with you all the time. Minding your business will solve 40% of your problems. Yes, I'm serious. Now, to be fair, I did make this up. However, I still stand behind it. The numbers may be made up, but the principle is real. And so it's really important that we understand personal responsibility. And that's what this episode is all about. So personal responsibility is this really interesting idea where we kind of have to understand, like, what's mine to hold and then what are other people's to hold. Sometimes it's a Venn diagram. Sometimes it should just be two circles. And so as we get into understanding personal responsibility, I want you to consider if you have been, right, kind of getting into other people's circles, or if you are able to really recognize like a good solid delineation of where your responsibility lies and where other people's responsibility lies. So what does it actually mean to mind your business, right? Minding your business is when we are choosing not to engage. So yes, we may be seeing someone who is, right, having a problem, right? We might have a friend who has something concerning come up, and maybe even a family member who we recognize is going through a hard time. It is not to say that we will not engage with them. It is not to say that we will not help them or reach out to them. It is to say that we are not responsible for whatever the problem is. That is what we want to pay attention to. And that's how we find that healthy selfish line, right? Of, okay, sure, this is an issue, but is it my issue? So we want to also make sure that we are letting adults handle adult consequences. Is somebody late, right, filling out their forms? Did they forget that they owed something? Are they late on a bill? Have they spent their money doing something else? Whoop. That sounds like a personal problem, doesn't it? It is. And so it's important that we let people handle their own consequences. It is not helpful to constantly save people from their own choices. It never gives them the ability to learn. It never allows them to recognize that these are real detriments in their life. It also just allows them to keep kicking the can down the road. So if you are a procrastinator, I am a recovering procrastinator, you really do understand this, because procrastinators have that feeling of like, it worked. Like, if it worked, like, why change? And it's because, right, that it keeps working, that procrastinators keep doing it. Sure, we're stressed. Sure, we're pulling our nighters. Sure, right, we're that lie of like, no, I just work really well under pressure. It's a lie. But, right, like, there are still consequences to that. Even if it is, right, a lack of sleep, even if things do end up going well, right, we have to recognize that when we are saving people from their behavior, we're not actually helping them. We're just showing them that their, right, lack of responsibility is working. And so next, right, understand that involvement is a choice, not an obligation. You are not required to jump in. There are people who will try to convince you that it is your obligation to jump in. That does not make it true. So why do people struggle with this, right? What makes it so difficult to be able to recognize like where the personal responsibility lies? Most of the time, it's because people are generally nice, right? Most people do want to help their friends and family, which is a good thing, right? Like, we never want healthy selfish to feel like we're just selfish, right? We want to give. However, we also want to make sure that we are not giving without, right, discernment. Also, a fear of being seen as selfish. Our reputation matters. how people see us matters. And we want to make sure that we are keeping a good reputation. And so often people are giving where they don't want to because of the fear of what people might say about them or what people might think about them. Even if they don't know that that is true, they're willing to push themselves more on the off chance that that could happen. And some people also confuse hearing a problem with being responsible for solving it. So do you have, honestly, a parent, it's normally a parent, who you may talk to about a problem and then they're like, well, this, you do this and you do this and you need to call these people, you need to talk to them. Why didn't you do that? Why didn't you do that? Did you think of doing this? And it's like, oh, time out, slow down. I didn't ask you. Ain't nobody asked you, right? I'm just trying to talk about the issue. I'm trying to talk about a problem. And so, right, sometimes people are just so ready to jump in that like it just feels like if we're talking about a problem, we should also be talking about solutions. And it's great, right? Solution-oriented people definitely have their place, right? They're super handy, but it's just not good to do in every situation. And so sometimes, right, these people are known as overfunctioners, right? The ones who want to jump in, they want to help, they want to kind of take control of problems for their loved ones. But overfunctioning is not helpful and it is not healthy either. And so just pay attention to if you're noticing that you're jumping in even before things go wrong. If you feel like you know what's best for that situation, even before getting information about it. And so, right, overfunctioning can definitely be one of the reasons why people struggle with personal responsibility and minding their own business. So next, you might know the real phrase from this, right? Captain Save-A-Ho. It's the people who always want to be the hero. There's always a problem that they can solve. There's all right, throw on a cape and let them go. And while those people are awesome, right? Like they tend to be really wonderful friends, right? They tend to be very loving, very kind, but they also tend to be know-it-alls sometimes, right? They also tend to be quite overbearing a little bit, right? And they will be the first person to tell you what you did wrong and why you should listen to them so they can come and save the day. But, right, you need to recognize if you have that Captain Save-A-Ho energy that you need to start pulling it back, right? And so are you problem solving before they even asked? If so, right, how can we know if we're problem solving before they even asked? Did you ask them any details about their problem? Like maybe, how do you feel about that? Well, what happened next? Have you come to a resolution? Did they fix it? Right, this is going to tell you if there even is a problem to solve, right? Maybe they're just talking to you about the experience of going through that problem, but they might have already reached a resolution, right? Your input, while valued, is not needed. And so just notice within your own self if you tend to be that person to jump in. Do you also find yourself taking on more emotional labor? Right? Where you are the one who is talking to everybody about their problems, right? You can never find a time to yourself because somebody's calling you to complain about their boyfriend. Somebody's calling you to complain about their debt. Somebody's calling you to complain about their mom, right? And if we're constantly giving emotional energy to be the carer, to be the nurturer, to be, right, fully present with them, it will drain you as well, right? Everything that we do takes a little bit out of our cup. And so be mindful that like you are not being that emotional labor and saver of all of the people in your lives. Another thing, right, that happens with Captain Save-A-Ho energy, resentment. And you're like, dang, why should he keep bringing up resentment? Because it keeps coming up. Because boundaries, right, will stop resentment. And I'm going to keep talking about resentment over and over and over until it clicks. Because a lot of times people who are, right, that saver, they're trying to fix everything, so they're trying to jump in, they will feel resentful because either A, you didn't take their advice, right? And that person talked to them so much, they gave all these great ideas, right? They're telling you what they should do and you didn't listen to none of it. And so then they're mad, right? Maybe that person feels resentful because like you constantly are using them for emotional labor or for problem solving needs. It's a lot of different things, but the real problem is that Captain Save-A-Hose don't know when to stop. They don't know when to stop saving hose. And we need to be able to really recognize that we cannot do that forever, right? And it is not always helpful, right? So that's a boundary issue. It's not generosity. So when is it your business, right? If right, we are recognizing when it's not our business, when should we be jumping in? When are we supposed to be helping, right? So healthy selfish does not mean a lack of care. We do care about our friends and family, and we want to make sure that they know. But, right, we also want to be able to do that, right, with discernment. And so context matters. So sometimes that we really do want to consider, like, that we can jump in. So when someone is hitting systemic barriers, so this could be like maybe educationally, maybe someone struggles with dyslexia or any other kind of learning disorder, and they need some help with being able to navigate the system. So if they have a friend or a son or daughter who needs an IEP, if they are trying to get into a specialty school, if they need help with test or extra test time, right? This would be a perfect time to jump in and to help and to kind of guide that person through this. This was not like a lack of preparation on their part. This is a part of their lives, and this is a systemic issue that they will have to face. And so we want to be there and be present with our friends and family when they are hitting systemic barriers. Next, emergencies. Ain't nothing you can do about emergency, okay? Like I was talking to my husband the other day, and we saw a truck that was broken down, and it was pouring raining. Ain't no time to have car issues. Ain't never a good time to have car issues, okay? And so like when somebody comes into an emergency, maybe they caught a flat tire, maybe their plane got canceled, right? Maybe some wild thing happened. Like life happens. And so when our family and friends are in emergencies, that is the perfect time to recognize, actually, yes, this is my responsibility, right? I'm here to help you. I'm willing to push things aside. I'm willing to cancel on other things that I had because your needs, your emergency is more important, right? And that is A-okay. Again, healthy selfish wants to be flexible, right? We want to find the times when it makes sense to prioritize our friends and family over ourselves, but we want to be doing that in moderation. And then the last time, right, when it can be our business is in situations where harm is not self-inflicted. So many people create their own issues, right? You know, those people who like, it's like, you are the drama. You're the one you are making all this stuff happen yourself. Like those, we're not going to bend over backwards for those. But when there are situations where somebody is, right, life is just kind of getting the best of you. They have 2 finals due, right? They got papers that they got to do. They also got to go to work. They also have to like pick up their kids. It would be completely reasonable if they were like, hey, I have all my finals this week. I have to work. I have to do these things. Can you pick up my kids and take them to like their after school stuff this week? Yes, right? Because context matters, because this person hopefully is not always asking for something. They're not always constantly trying to get things from you. And this is not a self-created problem. This was just a poor scheduling week, right? When things kind of piled on. And so kindness with discernment is how we get healthy selfish. And that's the goal. So when it's not your business, when someone volunteered and then they regret it, right? It's so common for people to be like, oh yeah, definitely, I'll do that. Like, and they'll just jump in and then they realize how much work that takes. And now it's a us issue, even though it was just a them agreement. That is not your business. If you don't have the time for it, if you don't have the bandwidth for it, that's a personal issue and they're going to have to find somebody else. If somebody made a decision without a plan. And that's a big one because a lot of times people are like, yes. I was like, well, what did you think was going to happen afterwards? They're like, oh, I didn't think about it. Well, you should. You should think about it right now because I'm not involved. Right? And then when someone wants you to absorb the consequences they created. So I know somebody who got way into debt with their home, right, and their mortgage. And then they were talking to their friends and family like, oh, well, we got to get this together. Who's we? When? What you mean? Because if you was the one messing it up, how am I the one that's supposed to absorb these consequences? Why I got to come out and do this when you had all this, right? Make it make sense. And so being really mindful about like, if people are coming to you when things go wrong, after things have already went wrong, and now it's on you to try to like jump and fix that issue. No, right? Compassion does not require a rescue. So control versus responsibility, right? Asking yourself what you actually control in those situations. So is there something that you had a part in, right? Is there something that is yours to manage, to, right, confirm, to take care of? If so, then yes, right? Like that's within my control and I will make that happen. What belongs to somebody else? So did they agree that they would do something? Did they say that they would take care of that separate issue? You can see this a lot maybe on like group trips where like one person is taking care of, right, the vacation rental and then the next person is doing the itinerary and the activities, right? And so we have to recognize like if the vacation rental person is trying to tell the itinerary person where we're going, ma'am, you need to find us a house. I got the itinerary, right? Like I'll let you know the activities when they're done. And so yes, right, input is there, but it's a difference between trying to take control from the person who was planning the activities, right? We can always share, but that doesn't mean it's ours to take over. So we want to resist trying to control outcomes for other people, right? That's how we get in that burnout and resentment because we can't control other people. We can't. So how to help without overstepping? You can offer options, but not ownership. So we want to think about like what you can do. So a good example of this might be if on this same vacation we're talking about, like somebody who agreed to do the itinerary says that they have to drop out, they can't come on the trip. So now it's kind of tossed up to the rest of the group. So you might be able to say like, well, actually, I can look up like some of the activities for the first 3 days if somebody is willing to look up the activities for the last 3, right? So we're kind of giving a little bit, so you don't feel like you're responsible for the full trip and it will still help the group, right? What you cannot do. Say what you're not going to be able to do. Tell your friends and family where your limits are. It is so important when it comes to boundaries that you communicate what you will not do or cannot do. Without communication, you cannot have healthy boundaries. And then who else might help, right? My family has a phrase called being voluntold. And so sometimes when we get into things and maybe where I'm like, oh no, this happened, I would immediately be calling my cousin Bernice if I had to start doing itineraries because she's phenomenal at them. I'm like, hey, I'm so sorry, but we have to plan these 3 days because so-and-so dropped out. And she would likely say yes. If she said no, that is A-okay. What she would likely do is then say like, oh, I know I have been there, or right, Gabrielle has been there, or this other person has been there. Let me see if they have their itinerary, and then I'll just send it to you, and you can choose things from there, right? We want to use our circle, right? We want to have right, interaction with them that helps us move the task along without just dumping something on their plate, right? That's the difference, right? I'm still active, I'm still involved, right? I'm still going to be doing these things, but she's just, we get by with a little help from our friends. So I'm going to give a real life boundary example. So this is a story about my own family. Probably about like over 10 years ago, I was in college and I was working during the summer out in the middle of Lucasville, Ohio. So very rural. It was at Camp Molly Laman. I was a Girl Scout camp counselor. And it was during the summer and it was Father's Day I knew it was coming up. So I had talked to my dad beforehand to say like, hey, I'm going to be down here. I won't be able to do any other stuff. But I already talked to Tyrone, who's my brother. and he's going to take care of Father's Day this year. Is that okay? My dad says yes. And I'm like, all right, perfect. Right. I know that I'm normally involved, like responsible for it. And so I asked Tyrone, I asked my dad, right? We cleared everything. They said it was fine. So responsibility was clear, agreement was made, right? My brother dropped the ball. Just a surprise for nobody. No shade, Tyrone. But, right, like, my dad calls me fussing. And he's like, Monique, guess what Tyrone did? He was like, why didn't you tell him what he needed to be doing? Because he was supposed to do this. He was like, he showed up at like 10:30, gave me $50 and a hug and said that he'll give me the rest next week. Like, why didn't you tell him to do this? Why didn't you tell him to do that? Why? I said, hold on. We talked about this. I told you he was going to be involved. I told you I wasn't planning it. We were very clear. He was like, well, you know, he was, This is a Tyrone conversation. If you're upset with how Tyrone did some things, you should talk to Tyrone about the things he did, right? I didn't have nothing to do with it. I wasn't there. I don't even know what the car looks like. I've been hours away for weeks. And so this is a conversation y'all need to have. I'm so sorry that he didn't do things well, right? I promise you when I'm back in charge, I got you. But also, you're not about to yell at me for something that somebody else didn't do well. And that's what you really want to pay attention to when it comes to like personal responsibility and like real life boundaries. Being able to acknowledge that actually, no, this is not my issue. It is not my problem. I acknowledge the concern, but like I'm not going to take responsibility for something that was not mine to be responsible for. And so that's minding your business with clarity. And so healthy selfish means letting people own their choices, even when it's uncomfortable. Sure, guilt may show up, right? I was just slightly, let's give it 15% guilty because my dad had a disappointing Father's Day. But like, I wasn't wrong. It wasn't on me. I was not required to go behind my brother and check up just to make sure that he could do that task well. If he could not do that task well, it was his job and his responsibility to ask me what I would have done if I had any ideas to collaborate about that. I would have absolutely said yes, and I would have absolutely helped him. But I could not predict that he would not know what to do or if he would do it well or not. He had the opportunity and he could choose. And so, right, we want to pay attention that when you're talking about personal responsibility, you're understanding that like it can still be loving even if it's firm, right? Like the year after that, my daddy did get a good Father's Day, right? and my brother, like he slid me the money like normal. And so it was fine. Everything worked out, but it's always really important that we just make sure that you are not being left feeling like there was something that you should have done or fixed or changed because someone else dropped the ball. And that's personal responsibility, right? We're not holding it for others. We're letting them be responsible for their own things. And so thank you so much for coming back to Healthy Selfish. Again, I'm your host, Monique Selman. You can find me on all social media platforms at Becoming Enriched. And I can't wait to see you next week.